Close your eyes for a second. Now imagine this. You fall asleep tonight in your warm bed. The fan is running. Your phone is charging. Everything is normal. But when you open your eyes, nothing is the same. No ceiling fan, no light bulb, no phone, no glass window, no mattress, just cold air, a hard dirt floor, and complete, total darkness. Welcome to the year 1026, exactly 1,000 years ago. And the man lying on that floor, his name was Aldrich, a 26-year-old peasant farmer in a small English village. He had no shoes, no education, no future. And today was just another ordinary day in his life. But for someone like you, this day would feel like a punishment. Aldrich opened his eyes before the sun came up. There was no alarm, no rooster yet. His body just knew. It had been trained by years of the same routine. Wake early or fall behind. Fall behind and you starve. The room he slept in was not really a room. It was a one-room hut made of mud walls and a straw roof. The floor was packed earth. There were no separate rooms for sleeping, cooking, or living. Everything happened in one dark space. And here is the part that would shock most people today. He did not sleep alone in this hut. His wife, his 3 children, and 2 goats, all of them shared the same space. The animals were kept inside because they were too valuable to leave outside. Losing a goat meant losing milk. Losing milk meant a child might not survive the winter. The air inside smelled thick. A mix of animal waste, smoke from last night's fire, and damp straw. There was no ventilation, no window that opened. Just a small hole in the roof where smoke was supposed to escape. Most of it never did. Aldrich stood up. His back ached. It always ached. He was 26, but his body moved like a man twice that age. There was no stretching routine, no glass of water on the knitstand, no brushing teeth. In fact, teeth were a disaster in this era. Most adults had rotting, broken, or missing teeth by their early 20s. There was no dentist, no toothpaste, no concept of oral care. If a tooth went bad, you either lived with the pain or someone yanked it out with a crude metal tool. No numbing, no cleaning, just raw force and a scream. Aldrich walked outside. The village was silent. A few other huts sat nearby, all looking the same. Mud, straw, smoke creeping out from the roofs. The ground was wet. It had rained during the night, and the paths between homes were nothing but soft, sticky mud. There were no roads, no pavements, no drainage system. When it rained, the entire village became a swamp. And the toilet? There was none. Aldrich walked to the edge of the tree line and relieved himself in the open. That was the system. Every person in the village did the same. The waste sat in the soil. It mixed with rainwater. That rainwater ran into the same stream where the village collected drinking water. Nobody understood contamination. Nobody understood bacteria. They could not see it. They could not name it. But it was killing them slowly, every single day. He splashed cold water on his face from a wooden bucket near the door. There was no warm water. Heating water required fire, and fire required wood, and wood had to be gathered by hand. Nobody wasted fuel on something as small as washing a face. His clothes were the same ones he wore yesterday, and the day before, and the week before that. He owned one set. A rough wool tunic that itched against his skin, tied at the waist with a strip of leather. No underwear, no socks. His feet were bare and cracked, hardened from years of walking on stone and dirt. Winter was coming, and Aldrich already knew what that meant. Someone in the village would not make it through. But waking up, that was the easy part, because what Aldrich was about to put in his mouth for breakfast would make your stomach turn inside out. And the worst part? He had no choice but to swallow every bite. Now here is something most people never think about. You open your fridge today, and there are 20 options: milk, eggs, juice, leftovers. But 1,000 years ago, there was no fridge, no preservation, no choices. You ate what was available, and what was available would horrify you. Aldrich sat near the fire pit. His wife had already started preparing the morning meal, and the word meal is being generous here. It was bread, dark, heavy, hard bread, but not the kind you are imagining. This bread was made from the cheapest grain available, often barley, sometimes rye, and the flour used to make it was never clean. Small stones from the grinding process stayed mixed inside, bits of dirt, pieces of husk, sometimes even tiny insects that had crawled into the grain storage. Every single bite was a risk. Those small stones, they ground down teeth over time. This is one of the biggest reasons people in this era had destroyed mouths before they turned 30. They were not eating sugar. They were not drinking soda. The bread itself was wrecking their teeth from the inside. And it got worse. During wet seasons, the stored grain would develop a fungus, a specific kind of mold that people back then could not identify. They did not know what it was. They just saw dark spots on the grain and used it anyway because throwing food away was not an option. That mold caused hallucinations, burning sensations in the limbs, violent sickness, sometimes death. Entire villages suffered at once, and nobody understood why. They thought it was a curse. They thought God was punishing them. But it was just bad bread. After the bread came the drink, and the drink was worse than the food. Aldrich drank water from the village stream, the same stream that sat downhill from where everyone relieved themselves, the same water where animals bathed, where waste collected after every rainfall. There was no boiling, no filtering, no treatment of any kind. He cupped his hands and drank it raw. Every sip carried invisible threats, parasites that would nest inside the stomach, bacteria that caused fevers lasting weeks, diseases that spread from one person to the next through this single shared water source. Children were the most vulnerable. A healthy child could fall sick from one bad drink and be gone within days. And the parents? They had no medicine, no doctor, no explanation. They just buried their child and kept living because grief was a luxury nobody could afford. Some villages had learned that ale was safer to drink than water, not because they understood science, but because the brewing process happened to kill some of the bacteria. So even children drank weak ale in the mornings, not for pleasure, for survival. Aldrich chewed his bread in silence. There was no conversation at the table. No table at all, actually. He sat on the ground and ate with his hands. No plate, no fork, no knife for cutting food, just fingers and teeth doing the work. The entire meal lasted a few minutes. There was nothing to enjoy. No salt for most peasants. No spices. No flavor beyond the stale taste of old grain in cold water. Eating was not a pleasure. It was fuel. Nothing more, nothing less. His stomach was half full. It would stay that way until the evening. But hunger was not the enemy today. Because the moment Aldrich stepped into that field to begin his work, his body would pay a price that no modern human could ever handle. And the worst part? He had been paying it every single day since he was 7 years old. Most people today complain about sitting at a desk for 8 hours. Stiff neck, sore back, tired eyes. But 1,000 years ago, work did not tire the body. It destroyed it, piece by piece, year by year. And it started before childhood even ended. Aldrich was 7 years old when he first held a farming tool. Not as a game, not as practice. As work, real work. His father placed a crude wooden hoe in his small hands and pointed at the soil. No instructions. No encouragement. Just a finger pointing at the dirt and a look that said start now. That was the day his childhood ended. There was no school. No reading. No playing after lunch. Children in this era were small workers. Their hands pulled weeds. Their backs bent over rows of crops for hours. Their legs carried buckets of water from the stream to the fields and back again, over and over until the sun disappeared. Nobody questioned it. Nobody called it cruel. This was simply how life worked. If a child did not contribute, the family did not eat. There was no room for softness in a world built on survival. Now Aldrich was 26, and every single day since that morning at age 7 looked almost identical. Wake before sunrise, walk to the field, work the soil, harvest what grew, carry it back, repeat. He did not own the land he worked. None of it belonged to him. Every field, every crop, every animal technically belonged to the local lord. Aldrich was a serf, a bonded laborer. He could not leave the village without permission. He could not marry without permission. He could not sell anything he grew without giving the lord his share first. And that share was massive. Sometimes more than half of everything Aldrich produced went straight to the lord's estate. What remained was barely enough to keep his family breathing through the winter. The tools he used were primitive. A wooden plow that needed his full body weight to push through hard soil. A hand sickle for cutting grain that blistered his palms, until the skin peeled off and hardened into rough patches. No gloves, no machine. No help from anything except his own 2 hands, and whatever strength was left inside his bones. By his mid-20s, Aldrich's body was already failing. His spine curved slightly forward from years of bending. His knees ached with every step. His hands were swollen and stiff most mornings. His shoulders carried a permanent tightness that never went away no matter how he slept. And here is the part that makes this truly terrifying. There was no recovery, no day off, no weekend, no holiday. The concept of rest did not exist for someone like him. If he stopped working, the crops failed. If the crops failed, his children starved. So he kept going, broken body and all. An injury in this era was a death sentence in slow motion. A deep cut could become infected within days. A broken bone meant weeks without work, which meant weeks without food. There were no doctors in the village. No medicine beyond wild herbs that sometimes worked and mostly did not. If something went seriously wrong inside the body, there was only one outcome: pain, then weakness, then death. And nobody would record his name when he was gone. But Aldrich survived the day. His muscles screamed. His hands bled. His stomach growled. Yet he made it to sundown. And that should have been a relief. But it was not. Because 1,000 years ago, when the sun disappeared, something far worse than work was waiting in the darkness. Try something right now. Close your eyes. Hold them shut for 10 seconds. That small moment of darkness, that uncomfortable feeling of not seeing what is around you. Now imagine that lasting 12 straight hours. No streetlight outside your window. No phone screen glowing on the knitstand. No switch to flip. Nothing. Just pure, complete, suffocating blackness. That was every single night 1,000 years ago. And for Aldrich, the night was never just dark. It was dangerous. The sun dropped below the tree line and the village vanished. Not slowly, not gradually. It vanished. One moment there were shapes, huts, trees, faces. The next moment there was nothing but black air and sounds. Aldrich's only source of light was a small fire inside his hut. But even that was unreliable. Wood was precious. Every log burned tonight meant one less log for cooking tomorrow. So the fire stayed small, just enough to push the shadows back a few feet from where his family slept. Candles existed in this era, but not for people like Aldrich. Candles were made from animal fat or beeswax, and both were expensive. A peasant family could not waste resources on something that burned away in hours. So darkness was the default. Darkness was the companion that arrived every evening and stayed until morning. And in that darkness, the mind played tricks. Every sound became a threat. A branch cracking outside could be an animal, or a thief, or something worse. People in this era believed deeply in things that lived in the dark. Demons, evil spirits, cursed souls wandering between villages. These were not fairy tales to them. These were facts, as real as rain, as real as hunger. A mother would hold her children closer when the wind howled through the walls. A father would sit near the door with a blade across his knees, not because an attack was likely every night, but because when it came, there would be no warning, no alarm, no lock strong enough to stop it. But the real killer at night was not what lurked outside. It was what lived inside the body. Disease moved through villages like a silent ghost. One week a neighbor was healthy. The next week they were shaking with fever. The week after that they were buried behind the church. And nobody understood why. Nobody could explain how sickness jumped from one person to the next. Aldrich had already lost his youngest son. The boy was 3 years old. He developed a cough one evening. By the next morning, the cough had turned into a rattling sound deep inside his chest. By the 3rd day, the boy could not open his eyes. By the 5th day he was gone. There was no diagnosis, no name for what took him. No one came to examine the body. Aldrich and his wife wrapped the child in cloth and carried him to the burial ground at the edge of the village. A prayer was spoken. The earth was filled back in, and life continued, because it had to. This was not rare. This was routine. Nearly half of all children born in this era did not make it past their 5th birthday. Fevers, infections, waterborne parasites. Illnesses that today would be cured with a single pill wiped out entire families in a matter of days. Aldrich lay on the floor of his hut, his wife beside him, his 2 surviving children between them. The goats shifted in the corner. The fire crackled low. Smoke filled the top half of the room with a thin gray cloud that never fully cleared. His chest hurt. It had been hurting for weeks. A dull ache that sat behind his ribs and pressed harder whenever he breathed deeply. He did not know what it meant. He had no word for it, no way to investigate it. He simply hoped it would pass. But hope was a weak medicine in a world that offered no mercy. He closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly. Every sound outside pulled him back. An owl, a distant howl, wind pressing against the straw roof. His grip on the blade near his hand never fully loosened. Tomorrow the sun would rise, and the whole cycle would begin again, if he was still alive to see it. Aldrich survived this day. One brutal, exhausting, terrifying day. But here is the truth that most people are not ready to hear. This was not his worst day. This was his average day. And the real number that proves just how impossible life was back then. The number that shows why the thumbnail was right all along. That reveal is coming next. And once you hear it, you will never look at your own life the same way again. You wouldn't survive. Maybe you laughed at that. But after everything you have just seen through Aldrich's eyes, let me ask you a real question. Could you? Could you actually survive even 1 week in his world? The answer is buried in one single number. And that number changes everything. 31. That was the average life expectancy 1,000 years ago. 31 years. Not 60, not 70. Not 80, like many people expect to reach today. 31. Let that sit for a moment. Most people reading this right now have already lived past the age when Aldrich's body would have been lowered into the ground. No gravestone, no ceremony, no written record that he ever existed. And 31 was not even guaranteed. That number was the average, meaning half the population died before reaching it, some at 25, some at 18, some before they ever learned to walk. The causes were endless. Famine struck when harvests failed. One bad season of rain could wipe out an entire village's food supply for the year. And there was no backup, no imported food from another region, no government aid, no emergency supply. When the food was gone, people simply starved, slowly, painfully, watching their own children weaken day by day with nothing to offer them. Then came disease, waves of sickness that swept through regions with no resistance, no vaccines, no antibiotics, no understanding of how illness spread. A single infected traveler passing through a village could trigger deaths that lasted months. Entire families disappeared, homes stood empty, and the survivors had no choice but to keep breathing and keep working the soil. War made everything worse. Lords fought other lords. Kingdoms clashed over land and power. And who paid the price? Men like Aldrich, pulled from their fields, handed a weapon they barely knew how to hold, marched toward a battle they had no part in choosing. Most of them never came back. And when they did, their farms had fallen apart. Their families had scattered. Their lives were unrecognizable. Now place a modern person inside that world. Someone used to clean water from a tap, temperature-controlled rooms, painkillers for a headache, soft beds, grocery stores with 1,000 options, screens that entertain every bored moment. Drop that person into Aldrich's village. No phone, no medicine, no shoes, no knowledge of farming, no tolerance for pain, no immunity to the bacteria swimming in the water. How long would they last? The first morning would break their spirit. The cold, the smell, the hunger that sits deep inside the stomach and never fully goes away. By midday, their hands would blister from tools they have never touched. By evening, their body would ache in places they did not know could hurt. By nightfall, the darkness would press against their chest like a weight they cannot lift. One day, that is all it would take to understand. This was not a life designed for comfort. This was a life designed for one single purpose: survival. And even that was never promised. Aldrich never knew any different. He never dreamed of hot showers or clean hospitals or electric lights, because those ideas did not exist inside his world. His normal was the nightmare you just witnessed. And he lived it without complaint, without protest, without asking why. He woke up. He worked. He ate what little there was. He held his children close in the dark, and he did it again the next day, and the next, and the next, until one day his body simply could not do it anymore. No headline announced his death. No record preserved his story. He came into this world with nothing. He left the same way, like millions before him, like millions after. So the next time the Wi-Fi goes down, the next time your coffee order is wrong, the next time you feel like your life is hard, remember Aldrich. Remember the dirt floor, the rotten bread, the burning muscles, the child he buried behind the church. Remember what daily life was really like 1,000 years ago. And remember the truth written on that thumbnail: you wouldn't survive. Neither would any of us.